The stars looked cold and empty to Admiral Kethvar as he stood on the bridge of his massive warship. Behind him, 300 Vorthan vessels moved through space like hungry wolves. Each ship was bigger than a city, covered in thick armor and bristling with weapons that could destroy planets. For 300 years, the Vorthan Empire had swept across the galaxy. They had crushed every world they found. Some planets fought back with everything they had. Others surrendered without. Firing a shot, it made no difference. The result was always the same. Kethvar touched the scars on his face, remembering battles from decades past. He had earned those scars fighting creatures that thought they could stand against the Vorthan Empire. They were all dead now. Their worlds were ash. Their people were slaves or worse. The bridge crew worked quietly around him. They knew their jobs well. Find a world, destroy its defenses, take what was useful, kill the rest. They had done this so many times that it felt like routine work. "Admiral," called his second-in-command. "We are approaching the target system." Kethvar nodded. This system was supposed to be different somehow. The scouts had found something unusual here. A young species that had only just begun to travel between planets. They called themselves humans. The Vorthans had faced young species before. They were always the easiest to defeat. Young species had weak weapons and no real strategy. They panicked when they saw the Vorthan fleet. Most of them begged for mercy. "What do we know about these humans?" Kethvar asked. His tactical officer checked his screen. "They live on the third planet from their star. They call it Earth. Population is about 8 billion. They have small colonies on nearby planets and moons. Technology level is very low compared to ours." Kethvar smiled. 8 billion was a good number. Enough people to make useful slaves, but not enough to put up a real fight. "What about their military?" "Primitive. They still use chemical rockets and basic energy weapons. Their biggest ships are smaller than our fighters. Intelligence suggests they spend most of their time fighting each other instead of preparing for real threats." This made Kethvar laugh. Species that fought among themselves were always the weakest. They never learned to work together until it was too late. By then, the Vorthan Empire was already burning their cities. "How long until we reach their system?" he asked. 3 days, Admiral." Kethvar turned to look at the tactical display. It showed the human system in detail. The third planet looked blue and green, covered with water and life. It would be beautiful for about 10 minutes. Then it would look like all the other worlds the Vorthans had conquered, gray, empty, dead. Far away from the Vorthan fleet, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the USS Valiant. Warning lights flashed red around the room. Every screen showed the same terrible message: unknown hostile fleet approaching Earth. Morrison was 45 years old and had spent half his life in space. He had fought in the Martian wars when the colonies tried to break away from Earth. He had seen friends die in the asteroid belt fighting pirates and smugglers. But he had never seen anything like this. "How many ships?" he asked. "Computer estimates. 300 vessels, Captain," replied his tactical officer, Amy Rodriguez. "Each one is at least 10 times bigger than our largest battleships." Morrison felt cold inside. The Valiant was humanity's newest and most advanced warship, but it was still just one ship. Even if every human vessel in the solar system joined the fight, they would be outnumbered 50 to 1. "What about the other fleets?" Morrison asked. "The Mars Defense Force has 12 ships ready for combat. The Europa Station can send 8 more. Earth itself has maybe 30 vessels that could fight in space." Rodriguez paused. "Captain, even if we had 100 ships, I don't think it would matter." Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people. The best that humanity had to offer. Lisa Park, his chief engineer, had designed half the systems on the ship. Tony Blake, his weapons officer, could hit a target the size of a coin from 1,000 miles away. Dr. Kevin Wright knew more about alien technology than anyone else alive. They were all going to die. The thought came to Morrison suddenly and clearly. There was no way around it. The aliens had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had weapons and technology that humans could barely understand. The Valiant and her crew of 200 would face them alone and lose. But Morrison had not become a starship captain by giving up when things looked bad. He had earned his rank by fighting when others ran away, by finding solutions when everyone else saw only problems. "Lisa," he called to his engineer, "how fast can we push the engines?" "The fusion drives are already running at 110%, Captain. Any more and we risk a core breach." "I didn't ask about the risk. I asked how fast." Lisa Park smiled grimly. She had worked with Morrison for 5 years. She knew that look in his eyes. "Give me 2 hours and I can get you 130%, maybe more." "Do it." Morrison turned to his weapons officer. "Tony, what's the status on our new plasma cannons?" "Still experimental, Captain. We've only test-fired them twice. Computer models show they should work, but in a real battle." Tony shrugged. "We might blow ourselves up instead of the enemy." "Better than not fighting at all." Morrison looked at each member of his bridge crew. "I won't lie to you people. We're probably all going to die in the next few days. But we're going to make those alien bastards remember us. We're going to show them that humans don't go quietly into the dark." The crew of the Valiant looked back at their captain with determination. They knew the odds. They knew they would probably lose. But they also knew that someone had to stand between Earth and the alien fleet. Someone had to buy time for the evacuation. Ships. Someone had to show the universe that humanity would fight for their home. In the engine room, Lisa Park began pushing the Valiant's systems beyond their limits. In the weapons bay, Tony Blake ran final checks on cannons that had never been used in combat. Throughout the ship, 200 men and women prepared for a battle they could not win. The alien fleet moved closer to Earth with each passing hour. Soon the Vorthons would learn something new about humans. They would learn that some species fight hardest when they have no hope of victory. The Vorthon fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a storm made of metal and fire. Admiral Kethavar watched his screens as 300 massive warships appeared around Earth's solar system. The blue planet hung in space ahead of them, small and defenseless. "Scan for enemy vessels," Kethavar ordered. His sensor officer worked quickly at his controls. "Admiral, I detect one ship. Just one. It appears to be moving toward us." Kethavar laughed. One ship. After 300 years of conquest, he had seen this before. Desperate species always sent their best vessel to die heroically while their world prepared to surrender. It was almost touching in its futility. "Show me this brave little ship," he said. The main screen displayed the USS Valiant. Compared to the Vorthon dreadnoughts, it looked like a tiny silver needle. The human ship was sleek and fast-looking, but it was barely the size of a Vorthon fighter craft. "Shall we destroy it?" "Immediately, Admiral?" asked his weapons officer. "No," Kethavar replied. "Let them come closer. I want to hear what these humans have to say. Their last words should be amusing." On the bridge of the Valiant, Captain Morrison watched the alien fleet appear on his screens. Even though he had expected it, the sight still took his breath away. The alien ships were enormous, dark gray mountains of metal bristling with weapons. Each one could probably destroy a city with a single shot. "My God," whispered Navigator Sam Collins. "There are so many of them." "Stay focused," Morrison ordered. "Amy, open a communication channel." Commander Amy Rodriguez worked at her station, trying to establish contact with the alien fleet. She was the best communications officer in the YAR human fleet, fluent in 12 Earth languages and expert in alien signal analysis. "I'm getting a response, Captain," she said. "Their language is completely unknown, but I'm running it through the translation computer." The main screen flickered and showed the face of Admiral Kethavar. The alien was tall and pale, with sharp features and glowing yellow eyes. Scars covered his face like a map of old battles. "I am Admiral Kethavar of the Vorthon Empire," the alien said. The translation computer made his voice sound cold and mechanical. "You will surrender your world immediately. Your species will submit to Vorthon rule or be destroyed. These are your only choices." Morrison stepped forward so the alien could see him clearly. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Navy. This is as far as you go. Turn your ships around and leave this system or we will stop you." The bridge of the Vorthon flagship fell silent. Then Kethavar began to laugh. It was a harsh, ugly sound, that filled the communication channel. "You will stop us?" Kethavar said. "You have one small ship. We have 300 vessels that have conquered worlds across the galaxy. Your weapons cannot even scratch our shields." "We'll see about that," Morrison replied. He nodded to Amy, who cut the communication channel. Dr. Kevin Wright, the ship's science officer, looked up from his instruments. "Captain, I've been scanning their ships. Their shield technology is impressive, but it operates on a different principle than ours. I think our plasma weapons might be more effective than they expect." "How effective?" Morrison asked. "I'm not sure. The theory is good, but we won't know until we try." Morrison turned to his weapons officer. "Tony, are the new cannons ready?" Tony Blake checked his controls. "As ready as they'll ever be, Captain. The plasma array is fully charged." "Good." Morrison looked around the bridge. "All stations, prepare for combat. Lisa, I need everything the engines can give us." In the engine room, Chief Engineer Lisa Park was already pushing the Valiant's fusion drives past their safety limits. The entire ship vibrated as power flowed through systems that had never been tested in real combat. "Engines at 140%, Captain," she reported over the comm. "I can hold this for maybe an hour before something melts." "That'll have to be enough," Morrison replied. Navigator Sam Collins plotted an attack course that would take them straight into the heart of the alien formation. It was insane, but it was also the last thing the aliens would expect. "Course laid in, Captain," Collins said. "Take us in," Morrison ordered. The Valiant accelerated toward the Vorthan fleet. On the alien flagship, Admiral Kethavar watched the tiny human ship approach with amusement. "They're actually attacking us," he said to his officers. "Record this. The High Command will want to see how foolish these humans are." The Valiant reached weapons range and opened fire. Blue plasma bolts streaked across space toward the nearest Vorthan dreadnought. Kethavar expected to see the energy beams bounce harmlessly off his ship's shields. Instead, the plasma punched through the shields like they were made of paper. The alien ship's hull armor cracked and burned. Emergency lights flashed on the Vorthan bridge. "What?" Kethavar shouted. "How is this possible?" "Admiral, their weapons are disrupting our shield matrix," his tactical officer reported. "The energy, frequency is unlike anything in our database." The Valiant fired again, targeting the weapon systems of another Vorthan ship. More plasma bolts found their mark, causing explosions across the alien vessel's hull. Morrison smiled grimly as he watched the results. "It's working. Their shields can't handle our weapons." But the Vorthans quickly recovered from their surprise. 300 ships turned their guns toward the single human vessel and opened fire. The space around the Valiant filled with energy beams and missiles. "Evasive maneuvers," Morrison ordered. Sam Collins threw the ship into a series of wild turns and rolls. The Valiant twisted through space like a dancer, its small size and agility allowing it to avoid most of the incoming fire. But some shots still found their target. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported damage control. Emergency force fields are holding." The Valiant continued its attack, darting between the massive alien ships like a fighter among bombers. Tony Blake targeted weapon systems and engines, trying to disable rather than destroy. Each hit seemed to surprise the aliens more. "They're not used to fighting something this small and fast," Amy Rodriguez observed. Dr. Wright was studying his sensors intently. "Captain, I'm seeing something interesting in their formation patterns. They're very rigid, very predictable. It's like they've been fighting the same way for centuries." "That's because they have," Morrison realized. "They've been conquering species that fight like them. Big ships, standard tactics, predictable movements. They don't know how to handle something different." Security Chief Maria Santos had an idea. "Captain, what if we broadcast some of our cultural data on their frequencies? Music, poetry, art. It might confuse them even more." "Do it," Morrison ordered. Soon, human music and voices filled the Vorthan communication channels. The aliens had never heard anything like it. Their rigid, militaristic culture had no concept of art for its own sake. The battle continued, with the tiny human ship dancing through the massive alien fleet, striking and retreating, confusing and disrupting. The Vorthans had overwhelming firepower, but they couldn't seem to pin down their elusive enemy. For the first time in 300 years, Admiral Kethvar felt something he had forgotten existed. Doubt. These humans were not like any species he had encountered before. They were unpredictable, creative, and absolutely fearless. The single human ship continued to fight against impossible odds, and somehow, it was winning. The battle had been raging for 6 hours. Admiral Kethvar stood on his bridge watching his tactical displays with growing anger. 12 of his ships were damaged. 3 were completely disabled. All because of one tiny human vessel that refused to die. "Status report," he demanded. His tactical officer looked nervous. "Admiral, the human ship continues to evade our targeting systems. Every time we lock onto them, they change direction in ways our computers cannot predict." Kethvar slammed, his fist on the command console. In 300 years of conquest, no single enemy ship had lasted more than a few minutes against his fleet. Yet this human vessel continued to dart between his dreadnoughts, like an insect that could not be swatted. "They're using some kind of advanced AI," suggested his science officer. "No organic pilot could make those maneuvers." "Then jam their computer systems," Kethvar ordered. On the Valiant, navigator Sam Collins pulled the ship through another impossible turn, barely avoiding a massive energy beam that could have vaporized them instantly. Sweat dripped down his face as he fought to keep them alive. "Sam, how are you doing this?" Captain Morrison asked. "I don't know, sir," Collins replied honestly. "I'm just flying by instinct. Every time they fire, I move somewhere else. It's like a game I played as a kid, except if I lose, we all die." Lieutenant Commander Pete Davis, the communications officer, had been listening to Vorthan radio chatter for hours. "Captain, I think I understand their problem. They use computer-controlled battle formations that they've perfected over centuries. All their tactics are programmed and predictable." Dr. Kevin Wright looked up from his science station. "That makes sense. They've conquered so many worlds using the same strategies that they never learned to adapt. We're the first enemy they've faced that doesn't follow their rules." Morrison nodded. "What else have you learned about them?" "They value order above everything else," Wright explained. "Their entire culture is built on hierarchy and following commands without question. The idea of individual creativity or improvisation seems to confuse them." Chief Petty Officer Nick Adams had been studying the alien ship designs through the battle. "Captain, I've noticed something. Their ships are built for long-range combat. They expect to stand far apart and shoot at each other until someone wins. They're not designed for close-quarters fighting." "What are you thinking?" Morrison asked. "If we could get inside their formation, board one of their ships, we might be able to cause some real damage from within." Morrison considered this. It was incredibly dangerous, but they needed to do something to turn the tide. "How would we get aboard?" "The new teleportation system," Adams replied. "It's still experimental, but it might work over short distances." Dr. Rachel Stone, the medical officer, had been treating wounded crew members while listening to the conversation. "Captain, boarding an alien ship is suicide. We don't know anything about their atmosphere, their internal defenses, or their biology." "We don't have many other options," Morrison said. "Our weapons are effective, but we can't fight 300 ships forever. Eventually they'll get lucky and hit us." Adams assembled a boarding party of 12 volunteers. They put on their combat suits and checked their weapons. The teleportation system had only been tested on inanimate objects, never on living people. "Remember," Adams told his team, "we're not trying to capture the ship. We just want to cause confusion and damage, hit their engines, their weapons, their communications, make them think about us instead of Earth." The Valiant moved closer to a damaged Vorthan cruiser. Lisa Park routed all available power to the teleportation system. "Initiating transport," she announced. The boarding party vanished in a flash of blue light. Seconds later, they reappeared inside the alien ship. The Vorthan corridor was dark and filled with strange shadows. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, and the air tasted metallic. "Move," Adams whispered into his radio. The boarding party split into 3 groups. One headed for the engine room, one for the weapons bay, and one for the bridge. They moved through the ship like ghosts. their soft boots making no sound on the metal floors. The Vorthons had never dealt with enemies inside their ships during battle. Their security forces were confused and slow to respond. By the time they realized what was happening, the humans had already planted explosive charges in critical systems. On the Vorthon flagship, Admiral Kethvar received reports of the boarding action with disbelief. "Impossible," he said. "How did they get aboard? Our shields were still active." "Unknown, Admiral," his tactical officer replied. "But we're receiving similar reports from 3 other ships. The humans are somehow appearing inside our vessels." Kethvar felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. These humans were not just unpredictable. They were using tactics that violated everything he understood about space warfare. The boarding parties completed their missions and teleported back to the Valiant, just as their explosives detonated. 4 Vorthon ships lost power and began drifting helplessly through space. "It worked," Adams reported to Morrison. "But Captain, there's something else. I managed to access one of their computer terminals. These aliens have never fought a species like us before. Every race they've conquered has followed similar patterns of warfare. Large ships, predictable formations, standard tactics." Morrison understood. "We're the first truly different enemy they've encountered." Security Chief Maria Santos had been continuing her psychological warfare campaign. She was now broadcasting recordings of human children singing lullabies on Vorthon frequencies. The effect on the alien crews was remarkable. "Captain, their communications are becoming increasingly disorganized," she reported. "They keep asking each other what the sounds mean. Some of them seem frightened by our music." Dr. Wright made another discovery. "Captain, I've been analyzing their shield frequencies. If we could coordinate our plasma cannons to fire in a specific pattern, we might be able to create a cascade failure that would disable multiple ships at once." "How many ships?" Morrison asked. "Maybe 20 or 30 if we're lucky." Morrison looked around the bridge at his exhausted crew. They had been fighting for hours against impossible odds, but they were still alive. More importantly, they were learning how to hurt their enemies. "Do it," he ordered. The Valiant positioned itself carefully within the Vorthon formation. Tony Blake synchronized the plasma cannons and fired in the precise sequence that Wright had calculated. The energy beams struck multiple alien ships simultaneously, creating a chain reaction that overloaded their shield systems. 26 Vorthon vessels suddenly found themselves defenseless. The Valiant immediately targeted their engines and weapons, disabling them before they could restore their shields. Admiral Kethvar watched nearly 40 of his ships become combat ineffective because of one small human vessel. His hands shook with rage and something else he did not want to admit: respect. These humans were not like any species the Vorthon Empire had ever encountered. They were creative, adaptable, and absolutely fearless. They fought not with overwhelming force, but with intelligence and innovation. For the first time in 3 centuries, Admiral Kethvar began to wonder if the Vorthon Empire might actually lose a battle. The battle had lasted 12 hours. The USS Valiant hung in space, surrounded by the wreckage of her enemies. Smoke drifted from holes in her hull, and sparks flew from damaged systems throughout the ship. But she was still fighting. Captain Morrison looked at his crew. They were exhausted, injured, and running on pure determination. Chief Engineer Lisa Park had burns on her hands from repairing power conduits under fire. Navigator Sam Collins could barely keep his eyes open after hours of impossible maneuvers. But none of them had given up. "Status report," Morrison ordered. 68 Vorthon ships disabled or destroyed, reported Tony Blake. "But Captain, we're running out of options. Our weapons are overheating, our shields are failing, and we've used most of our ammunition." Dr. Kevin Wright looked up from his science station. "Captain, I've been studying the remaining Vorthon ships. They're clustering around their flagship, probably waiting for new orders. I think we've confused them so badly that they don't know what to do next." Morrison nodded. The aliens had lost nearly a quarter of their fleet to a single human ship. Their perfect record of conquest had been shattered, but there were still over 200 enemy vessels, and the Valiant could not fight forever. "Any word from Earth?" Morrison asked. Communications Officer Pete Davis shook his head. The evacuation ships are still loading civilians. They need at least 6 more hours to get everyone off the planet. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. 6 hours. His ship and crew had to hold out for 6 more hours against an enemy that outnumbered them 200 to 1. "Captain," said engineering specialist Carl Johnson over the comm, "I've been working on something down here. What if we turn the Valiant into a weapon?" A guided missile aimed right at their flagship. The bridge fell silent. Morrison knew what Johnson meant. Ram the alien command ship at full speed. The collision would destroy both vessels, but it might break the enemy fleet's leadership and give Earth time to escape. "That's a suicide mission," Dr. Rachel Stone said quietly. "We're all going to die anyway," replied First Officer Danny Cooper. "At least this way our deaths would mean something." Morrison looked around the bridge. He saw fear in his crew's eyes, but also determination. They were ready to sacrifice themselves for Earth, but he was not ready to give up yet. "Kevin, is there any other way?" Morrison asked his science officer. Dr. Wright had been working frantically at his station. "Captain, I think there might be. The Vorthan ships all use the same type of power core. If we could create a specific energy pulse with our quantum drive, we might be able to overload their systems without destroying them." "Explain," Morrison said. "It's like tuning a musical instrument. Their power cores operate on a very precise frequency. If we can match that frequency exactly and amplify it, we could cause a feedback loop that would shut down their entire fleet." Tony Blake frowned. "What about our own systems?" "Human technology works differently," Wright replied. "Our quantum drive should be immune to the pulse." Morrison considered the plan. It was risky, but it was better than ramming the enemy flagship. "What do you need?" "Time to calculate the exact frequency and all the power Lisa can give me." In the engine room, Lisa Park was already pushing the Valiant systems beyond their breaking point. "Kevin, I can give you one massive pulse, but it'll probably burn out our quantum drive. We'll be dead in space afterward." "Better than being just dead," Wright replied. As the science officer worked on his calculations, the Vorthan fleet began to move again. Admiral Kethvar had finally decided on a new strategy. Instead of trying to outmaneuver the human ship, he would surround it completely and destroy it with overwhelming firepower. "They're forming a sphere around us," reported Sam Collins. 3 layers deep, there's no way out." Morrison watched the alien ships move into position. 200 massive vessels arranged themselves in a perfect sphere with the Valiant at the center. Every weapon in the Vorthan fleet was pointed at the tiny human ship. "Kevin, how much longer?" Morrison asked. "Almost there, Captain. The frequency calculations are incredibly complex." On the Vorthan flagship, Admiral Kethvar prepared to give the final order. The human ship had fought bravely, but this was the end. No vessel could survive the combined firepower of his entire fleet. "All ships, prepare to fire on my command," he announced. The space around the Valiant filled with the charging whine of 3,000 weapons preparing to fire simultaneously. Morrison's crew braced themselves for the end. "Got it," Wright announced suddenly. "Captain, I have the frequency, but I need 30 seconds to charge the quantum drive." "We don't have 30 seconds," Morrison replied, watching the enemy weapons. "Reach full charge." Communications specialist Tracy Bell had an idea. "Captain, what if we surrender? Just for long enough to buy time?" Morrison nodded. It went against everything he believed, but his crew came first. "Pete, open a channel to the enemy flagship." Admiral Kethvar appeared on the screen, his scarred face showing satisfaction. "Are you ready to surrender, human?" "We want to discuss terms," Morrison replied, trying to buy time. "There are no terms. You will shut down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." Behind Morrison, Dr. Wright worked frantically to complete his calculations. 20 seconds, 15 seconds, 10 seconds. "Your time for talk is over," Kethvar declared. "All ships fire! Now, Kevin!" Morrison shouted. The Valiant's quantum drive activated with a blinding flash of light. A pulse of pure energy expanded outward from the human ship, washing over the Vorthan fleet like an invisible wave. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the alien ships began to shut down. Their lights went out, their weapons powered down. Their engines stopped. In seconds, the entire Vorthon fleet was floating helplessly in space. On the Vorthon flagship, Admiral Kethvar watched his instruments go dark. Emergency power flickered on, but all the main systems were dead. His mighty fleet, which had conquered hundreds of worlds, had been disabled by a single human ship. "Impossible," he whispered. Morrison looked around the bridge of the Valiant. His crew was cheering, but he felt only exhaustion. They had won, but at a terrible cost. Their ship was badly damaged, their quantum drive was burned out, and they were stranded in space with a fleet of disabled enemy vessels. "Captain," Tracy Bell reported, "I'm receiving signals from Earth. The evacuation ships have reached minimum safe distance." Morrison smiled for the first time in hours. They had done it, they had saved Earth, but he knew this was not really the end. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. The Vorthon Empire had been stopped by humans for the first time in 3 centuries. Word of this defeat would spread across the galaxy. Other conquered species might find hope. Other worlds might fight back. The age of Vorthon supremacy was ending, and it had ended because one human ship refused to surrender. 3 days after the battle, Admiral Kethvar found himself aboard the USS Valiant as a prisoner. The irony was not lost on him. For 300 years he had stood on the bridges of conquered ships, accepting the surrender of defeated enemies. Now he was the one in chains. Captain Morrison entered the small conference room where Kethvar waited. The human looked tired but calm. He carried no weapons and showed no signs of hatred or anger. This confused the Vorthon admiral more than anything else. "You should have killed me," Kethvar said as Morrison sat down across from him. "Why?" Morrison asked simply. "Because I am your enemy. Because I came here to destroy your world and enslave your people. Because that is what I would have done to you." Morrison poured himself a cup of coffee from a small pot. The smell filled the room with a warm, pleasant aroma that Kethvar had never experienced before. "Would you like some?" Morrison offered. Kethvar stared at the human captain. "You offer hospitality to the one who tried to kill you?" "You're my prisoner now," Morrison replied. "That means you're under my protection. It's how we do things." This made no sense to Kethvar. In Vorthon culture, prisoners were either slaves or dead. There was no middle ground. "I do not understand your species," he admitted. "That's probably why you lost," Morrison said without cruelty. Over the next few hours, Morrison and Kethvar talked. The human captain asked questions about Vorthon society, their history, their reasons for conquest. Kethvar found himself answering honestly, though he did not know why. "We conquer because we are superior," Kethvar explained. "Strong species rule over weak ones. It is the natural order of the universe." "But you didn't conquer us," Morrison pointed out. "Does that make humans superior to Vorthons?" Kethvar struggled with this logic. "You won through trickery and luck, not through strength." "We won through creativity and determination," Morrison corrected. "We adapted to your tactics. We found new ways to fight. We refused to give up even when we were outnumbered." Linguistics. Officer Steve Parker joined their conversation, serving as a translator for the more complex ideas. Through him, Kethvar learned about human concepts that had no equivalent in Vorthon language. "What is this word, forgiveness?" Kethvar asked. Parker explained carefully. "It means choosing not to seek revenge, even when someone has wronged you. And mercy? Showing kindness to those who are powerless, even your enemies. Cooperation? Working together toward a common goal, each contributing their strengths." These ideas were completely foreign to Kethvar. Vorthon society was built on domination, hierarchy, and the elimination of weakness. The idea that strength could come from diversity was revolutionary. Dr. Laura Adams entered the conference room to check on both men. She treated a small cut on Kethvar's forehead with the same care she would show a human patient. The alien admiral watched in amazement as she worked. "Why do you help me?" he asked her. "Because you're hurt," she replied simply. "I'm a doctor. I help people who are hurt. But I am your enemy. Right now, you're my patient. That's all that matters." Kethavar looked around the room at these humans who showed him kindness despite everything he had done. Captain Morrison had defeated his entire fleet, but treated him with respect. Dr. Adams cared for his wounds even though he had tried to destroy her world. Officer Parker patiently answered his questions about human culture. This was not how conquest was supposed to work. The defeated were supposed to be broken, enslaved, or killed. They were not supposed to teach their conquerors about mercy and forgiveness. While Kethavar struggled with these new concepts, the crew of the Valiant worked to repair the disabled Vorthan ships. Chief Engineer Lisa Park led teams of human technicians who restored power and life support to the alien vessels. They could have left the Vorthons to die in space, but that was not the human way. "Why are you helping us?" A young Vorthon engineer asked Lisa as she repaired his ship's main computer. "Because it's the right thing to do," Lisa replied. "Just because we fought each other doesn't mean we have to be enemies forever." The Vorthan engineer had never heard such words before. In his culture, enemies remained enemies until one side was completely destroyed. The idea that former enemies could become friends was impossible to understand. News of the human victory spread quickly through the Vorthon fleet. The alien crews heard stories of human kindness and mercy. They learned about a species that valued art, music, and creativity, alongside military strength. Some of them began to question everything they had been taught about conquest and superiority. On the 5th day, Kethavar made a decision that would change galactic history. He requested a communication link with the Vorthon High Command on their homeworld. Captain Morrison allowed the transmission, though he monitored it carefully. Kethavar appeared on screen before the ruling council of the Vorthan Empire. "Report, Admiral," commanded the High Chancellor. "Have you conquered the human world?" Kethavar took a deep breath. "No, High Chancellor. We have been defeated." Shocked silence filled the council chamber. No Vorthon fleet had ever been defeated in 3 centuries of conquest. "Impossible," the High Chancellor declared. "How many ships did they have?" "1," Kethavar replied. The council erupted in angry voices. Some demanded that Kethavar be executed for failure. Others called for a larger fleet to be sent to finish the job. "Listen to me," Kethavar said loudly, silencing the council. "These humans are not like any species we have encountered. They do not fight for conquest or domination. They fight for survival and for principles we do not understand. They show mercy to their enemies and value the lives of all beings." He paused, gathering his courage for what he would say next. "I recommend that the Empire offer humanity membership as equals, not as conquered subjects. They have much to teach us about strength that does not come from domination." The High Chancellor's face showed disbelief and rage. "You have been corrupted by alien influence. You will return to face judgment." "No," Kethavar replied calmly. "I will not return. I resign my commission and request asylum among the humans." With that, he cut the transmission. The Vorthan Empire's greatest admiral had just defected to the species he had been sent to conquer. Captain Morrison looked at Kethavar with surprise and respect. "Are you sure about this? You can never go home again." Kethavar smiled for the first time in decades. "Captain, I have learned that home is not a place. It is being among people who value life and show mercy to their enemies. If you will have me, I would like to help you teach my people these lessons." Morrison extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. After a moment's hesitation, Kethavar took it. The Vorthon Empire's age of conquest was ending. In its place, something new was beginning. A partnership between former enemies who had learned that true strength came not from destroying differences, but from embracing them. The galaxy would never be the same again.